Useless Monster by Mute Crows, Chapter 11 or Chapter 10. He stared blankly at the ground in front of him, thoughts too fast to follow as he walked out of the spectator bay to the field. Bakugo and Shinso had left first so that they could enter the building and get to their spot they wished to be at. He puts in his earpiece and it clicks on with a soft ping and looks up at the building they were to enter, holding the blueprints numbly. Deku, are you okay? Uraraka leaned into his vision and he blinked a few times, eyes taking a moment to focus on her directly. His ears were ringing with a tinny shrill that he felt bumping along to his pulse. He was panicking and not showing much of it outwardly, it seemed. There was no way this could go any direction but south, and fast. A small comfort in the fact that he knew there would be no comfort in it at all. It was a self-canceling scenario. Yeah, He sighed as he looked at the floor plans in his hands. They needed to get this over with, and hopefully he wouldn't be dead on the other side of it. Uraraka waited patiently, even in the precious little time they had to prepare. Bakugo will absolutely come for me directly. I don't know Shinso's actual quirk, but it isn't physical in any way, or else he would have been able to use it in the assessments yesterday. Izuku took as subtle of a shaky breath as he could. He would rather leave school in one piece today. If we can approach this with as much stealth as we can, we would have our best chances. And if Bakugo does come for us? Uraraka watched and listened intently as Izuku pointed out the locations of all the stairs, silently. You run for the nearest stairwell and continue searching. Bakugo won't go after you as long as I'm still part of the exercise. Once you find the weapon, you will have to capture it as efficiently as you possibly can. If you can't, ping me and I will try to help without bringing Bakugo to you. She didn't look too happy with how confident he was about Bakugo targeting him alone, but nodded along. They pored over the blueprints, and Izuku pointed out that there was a sort of pseudo-pattern to the floor layout, it shifting the halls in a set direction each floor so that they were similar enough to trick those who didn't notice. Uraraka pointed out the large room overlays and how it seemed to drift around the perimeter of the building at an offset from each level. The careful way that she explained floor plan basics told of previous experience reading them, and Izuku very much appreciated it. Her sure words, as she read the plans, were grounding in a similar way to the distant strain of All Might. Herald him! You may enter the building now! All Might spoke over their earpieces, and Izuku gulped despite his dry mouth. Uraraka pointed at one of the open windows on the second floor and gave him a questioning look. I can lift us up, she suggested as she held her hands out. He shrugged and offered a hand, pulling his glove aside so she could tap his skin. The loss of gravity still felt strange as he slowly drifted up, pulled along by Uraraka. She tapped herself, and they both drifted up towards the window. Once inside, she let them go, and Izuku let go of the breath he was holding. There was no immediate sign of the enemy team, and Izuku pointed in the direction of the closest large room that would likely fit the weapon. He carefully leads them through the floor without incident, along with the next one. He distantly wished for his real antenna. At least then he would know where everyone was in the building on sound alone. They were halfway through the fourth floor when it really started. He hadn't even heard the footsteps, just the short blast that had him jerk back and simultaneously threw Uraraka forwards past the hall. He felt a rush of air as an unnecessarily large gauntlet brushed just out of contact with his face. The sneer on Bakugo's face was uncomfortably similar to their most recent out-of-school encounter, and his breathing stuttered as it picked up. Bakugo stood and squared off with him back to Uraraka in a clear show of disregard. She seemed shocked by the sheer animosity coming from their classmate, but Izuku didn't take his eyes off Bakugo as he said one word. Run! Bakugo laughs as he throws a punch, Uraraka hesitating before taking off in what was hopefully the direction of the stairs like they had planned. Izuku ducked and jumped back from the blow, every part of him telling him to run too, as he carefully and sharply dodges every punch, kick, and blast. Years of exposure to Bakugo's tactics coming in handy for once when he found himself actually trying to stay away, or else Uraraka would be next. He bounces back and away and down halls, trying to remember how the floor was laid out and the fastest way to the main room. His skin itched under his costume with tingling memory, and his hair stung of singed pieces from too many close calls already. Bakugo was getting madder too, sweating more, setting off larger and more ambitious blasts, getting harder and harder to dodge. He distantly realized he was slowly being backed into a corner, and the narrative in his mind did something new. Run away, get away from the danger, escape, stop him, protect them! Izuku ducked and surged forward without any real thought behind it, a hand on the underside of Bakugo's gauntlet, redirecting a blast directly towards the ceiling as he went eye to eye with the fiery teen. The shock was clear in those red eyes as Izuku gave a sharp tug. His knee met Bakugo's chest in a bruising impact that he felt bloom but left untouched. He wheezed, winded. Izuku let go of the gauntlet to grab his other arm and whip around Bakugo in the same motion that slung him into the wall. Izuku bolted. His hair was on end and he felt both too hot and too cold at the same time. His earpiece pinged. I found the weapon. It's on the north wall almost directly above the lobby on your floor. Shinzo saw me, but he hasn't done anything but speak so far. She sounded confused about it, to say the least, but Izuku just focused on getting to the lobby. It was 2 halls over. He just needs to get there. Okay, just... He chokes on his own breathing when he hears the rage-filled roar of Bakugo having gotten his breath back in the following explosion. Do your best, I'm right below you! He didn't hear her response as he looked down the hall and saw a look on Bakugo's face he was not wanting to know the reason behind. A manic excitement that had Izuku stalling his sprints towards the lobby. He was literally running on opposite end of the hall from Bakugo. He turned towards him, brows furrowing in confusion at the laughter that was bubbling out of him as he raised his gauntlet. He realizes with a heart-wrenching gut drop of fear that the laughter is at whomever is on the other side of his earpiece. Trust me, this won't kill him! The pin clicked. Izuku felt his heart beat once. The heat hits before the fire even reaches him. He turns and curls to protect his face, hands coming up to cover the back of his neck, the force of the blast easily throwing him like he weighed nothing. He smacked against the wall, shoulder first, with a crack that was at best multiple fractures. The glass of the windows rained onto the floor nearby. His ears were ringing a solid tone as his vision blurred. He shakily stood and got his gaze to focus just in time to see the fist that slammed into his head. He groaned at the way it left him reeling and instead kept his eyes closed. Bakugo was getting strained in his wrists from Kirk use. He could feel it. He ducked out of the way at the next punch, almost tripping as his head spun even without the visual input. The ringing was fading and he heard the insults being slung his way. I don't care what roundabout bullcrap you pulled to get into my class, Deku! Your useless ass can't even stand after that blast, and that was nowhere near my best. How is your sorry excuse of a life gonna get anywhere other than the dirt you belong in if you can't take such a small blast? No one is here now, but they sure can see your miserable self. Izuku blinked rapidly as he tried to tether himself enough to stop spinning. The spike in the strain in wrists had him dodging to the side again before the blast even set off. You're insane! Izuku stumbled and almost fell as he dodged another punch. You're insane, Bakugo! Bakugo just laughed as he blasted himself over Izuku and kicked him in the shoulder. Izuku bit down the sharp cry as it definitely broke with the added stress of the kick to the already existing fractures. He blinked again as he felt what must be blood drip down and into his eye. It burned. You're worthless! Your quirk is worthless! Everything you do is worthless! You useless shitbag! Bakugo was laying in at him now, Izuku's mind too preoccupied with just trying to stay away to retaliate at all. You have no right to be here, Deku! And I'm going to prove it by beating you down so efficiently in this basic exercise that you will have no choice but to wake up from whatever dreams Mommy feeds you! He choked as Izuku punched him in the throat, seething! Izuku doesn't even remember his body moving with the low blow, but he also did not care. Bakugo continued to wheeze as Izuku attempted to sweep a leg out from under him, body singing electric. He barely missed as Bakugo bounced back, a hand on his throat as he continued to choke. It wasn't broken. Izuku would have felt it if it was, but it would definitely bruise. It got dirty then. Jabs, sharp but shallow punches, quick movements, small blasts that Izuku ignored to keep Bakugo crowded. Every time Bakugo tried to jet himself away, Izuku used the spikes of Quirk Strain to predict and redirect the shots. Izuku can see the anger building in Bakugo as he guided him around the lobby with only one functioning arm, the other tucked carefully. Bakugo brought a gauntlet down onto his broken shoulder with an audible crack that had Izuku screaming sharply, tears filling his eyes instantly. The break in the push and pull movements was all he needed to grab Izuku and throw him against the nearest wall. Izuku hit it hard. It dropped to the ground even harder. His senses fogged over by the wild spinning in his head, a suggesting push of a change that had his full attention now. He can't even register the second gauntlet being lifted towards him with proud and mocking laughter. Can't hear the way his own earpiece is hissing in static from being broken by the impact of the wall. Can't hear Bakugo's barely started sentence get cut short as red eyes glazed over and arms dropped. Shinzo felt the moment his quirk latched onto his teammate. The amount of relief he felt that shouting out the shattered window actually worked was immense. The moment he heard All Might even hint that Bakugo was about to disqualify the villain team, he had to do something. Good lord, you would think that his teammate would use at least one brain cell at some point in the exercise. He was exactly the kind of kid that pissed him off when he was younger. Gifted, and thus higher and mightier than that personality. He turns from the window after giving the order for Bakugo to return to him and looks at Uraraka. She had her wrists taped together and was taped to one of the support pillars, eyes blank. All Might didn't exactly say if the heroes were out for good the moment they were caught, or if they had the option to escape, so better safe than sorry. He had figured that Bakugo was volatile just from the air he carried himself with day one, and it was proven when he had tried to bring up some sort of plan for the exercise. Not that he had a single clue what was happening on the floor below when that blast went off. The shattered glass was a shock, as was the way part of the floor caved in the far corner of the room. When Bakugo actually made it to the room, he walked up to Shinzo to await a new command. He stopped a little closer than he would have liked, so he backed away a few steps inside. How much angrier would you get if I taped you to a pillar too? He watched the blank expression and felt that absolute fit that Bakugo was throwing against the control. So, a lot more just inane rage, I take it. Shinzo could easily tape him up as well with no issue, but he would need Bakugo anyways if Midoriya made it up and past him. He saw the ball throw, an unblinking reaction to literally breaking a bone. If he didn't get a hold of him with his quirk, he likely wouldn't do too great in a one-on-one brawl. So he would have to rely on Bakugo for that, which was, how do you say? Absolute crap, and he really needed to work on his hand-to-hand. You aren't gonna get out of it, so just stop trying. Bakugo's mental fight kept raging on with no signs of settling in sight. Shinzo let out a loud sigh as he settled into watching the doorways. Izuku blinked at the empty room, confused as to what happened while he was trying to ground himself. He didn't have time to figure out what it was, though. He could kind of hear the sizzling as he pulled out the broken earpiece. Hopefully he wouldn't have to pay to replace it because he didn't even have the cash to eat more than once a day at the moment. The amount of time he had left was beyond him, but he didn't want to lose an exercise by just giving up. It wasn't exactly something he would have ease in overcoming, that's for sure, broken shoulder and such, but he had a plan. One that his shoulder wouldn't agree with much, but he has had to bolt with injuries before and felt it wasn't too out of his own capabilities at the moment. He leaned out of the window and looked up, relieved to find the window on the floor above, also thoroughly shattered. He could work with that. A glance at his broken earpiece, and he tucked it into his belt. It was no use anyways. This would be both a new and familiar experience, it would seem. He triggered the release of the thick and sturdy grip talons on his boots before he set off his gloves. It was interesting to watch them slide out smoothly, locking silently into place. He leaned out the window and pushed his fingers of his good arm into the outside wall with unexpected ease. It took some angling to get his boots to dig in. A soft inhale, and he took the metaphorical leap of faith, swinging himself out of the window to be stuck to the outside of the building by his claws alone. He sighed in relief at the way they didn't even budge, and took another breath before swinging his bad arm up to anchor himself. He only had to scale one floor, just under 3 meters, and he would be at the next window. It hurts! His broken shoulder was aflame in nerves, rapid fire sending pain signals he resolutely attempted to push down. The motion of removing and once more sinking claws into the wall was blissfully near silent as he climbed. He needed every bit of stealth he could get. The shifted focus of weight was a weird observation in the back of his mind, that he had the weight of his body focused on his wrists and ankles instead of clawed toes. He pulled himself up to be next to the window and peered inside. Shinso had his back to the window, instead facing the door. Uraraka was tied up with a blank look that was shared by Bakugo, who was facing his direction, but completely devoid of any body language that even vaguely spoke of a hint of his normal demeanor. It was unnerving if he wasn't going to let go of an advantage. The weapon was settled not even 5 meters from the window. It was so close, he just needed to be careful. He looked down at the shattered glass across the floor and took a slow and quiet, deep breath. Eyes locked on Shinso, who was muttering softly to himself, Izuku reached around to the inside wall and tensed in anticipation for possible sudden noise as he dug his claws into the interior wall. There was thankfully no real sound from it. He just as tensely snuck around the window and made his way slightly to the side of the window to not be over the glass. Once clear, he gently stepped down with no noise. A silent sigh of relief. He lifted a foot and regretted it immediately as the claws on the boots made a soft but still noticeable scuff sound that must have been lost to the wind outside the building. Izuku felt the way his body was hit with a massive jolt of fear that had no right to be coming up at a school exercise. Shinso's head whipped in his direction. Izuku bolted to the weapon. Bakugo shouted rage unbridled. Uraraka yelped in surprise. He felt the heat of flame once more. His hand landed flat on the weapon moments before Bakugo barreled him over. He spinned as Bakugo's fist rears and freezes. "Hero Team wins!" All Might burst over the intercom, not even a heartbeat after Izuku's back had hit the ground. Uraraka tears from where she's died, and Izuku is staring at Bakugo's fist, still raised, expecting the impact to come suddenly and trying his best to brace himself for it. He could feel that the boiling glare being burrowed through him was just the top of the hellfire pit inside Bakugo. Shinso sighed as he appeared in the edge of Izuku's vision, but Izuku didn't dare look away from the fist. He didn't dare to move. He was hurt enough as is.